ALTBAYS show is live, brought to you by ALTBAYS.nz. We are a media company, so if you would like to be a YouTuber, it's the dream of every child nowadays, isn't it? We can make that happen. It's a good way to start a show, isn't it? It's horrible. Thank you very much. Breaking the ice. We go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's also a button right at the bottom of the screen written join. And if you click on that one, you can put some dollars there for the team because we don't have many of those dollars. So we appreciate your support. That'll be cool. Thank you. We are on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. If you have a short attention span like mine and you can only put up with clips, do it. Follow us there, and we appreciate your support there too. Obviously, we are a podcast, so you will find us on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, all the main audio platforms. ALTBAYS, just check it out. We're there. It's pretty good shows we've done. We've been doing this for 134 shows, religiously 3 times per week. We haven't missed one yet. Even with the water. Can you open the camera, Taylor, please? Can you show us? We have a beautiful leak coming from the ceiling. Thanks very much for the building. Can we have some? Oh, good. I wanted to clap, but the Yay! It's been raining like hell in the Coromandel, so if you're coming on holidays, good luck. No, I'm joking. My parents are coming for the first time in 9 years.
Oh no, I'm sorry about the weather.
I know, right? We still have 20 days though, so hopefully we'll be fine.
Do some sun dancing.
Yeah, I will start doing the sun dancing. I'm just gonna learn how to do some sun dancing with our guest here tonight. On my left, I have Anusha Bhana.
Kia ora.
Can you teach me some sun dancing?
I have no idea. I'm pretty sure we can Google it though.
We can Google it.
Yeah, there'll be some YouTube videos.
There will definitely be YouTube videos for that.
There is a YouTube video for everything.
There is.
And
Yeah.
I
That's true.
mean everything.
What are your favorite searches on YouTube, Anusha? If I was there sneaky and have a look at your YouTube searches, what would I find?
Do we really want to know?
It's mostly music stuff. Like, you know, I'm always hanging out to see live performances of my favorite bands because, well, it's been a while since bands could come here, and I just like seeing bands in their element playing live. Like, I love listening to their albums and everything, but I love seeing them live as well. So, yeah, mostly music, some social issue stuff sometimes if I'm following somebody and I'm looking for a video. But, yeah, maybe some how-to gardening stuff maybe.
How to make Christmas cake.
How to make Christmas, recipes,
Helpful. Do you prefer, prefer is a tricky one, but do you like those bands that play live similar to what the album is, or you like the ones that go different and you're like, whoa, what a version they're playing for that song? Look at that.
Oh, both.
Both.
Yeah. Like, I saw Tool for the first time just before we all went into lockdown. I think it was the last show. I think he bought COVID here actually.
I heard.
But and they jammed a bit. But a lot of the songs that they did were, you know, quite very similar to what it's like on the album. And that was incredible because I'd never seen them live before and all I'd ever known is the album. But then there's others, like we were talking about Jack White, who does a different set list every night for every show. And you never know what he's going to play next. And he just starts stuff and he jams and he goes off on tangents. And it's awesome because you just get lost in it. Yeah, I like both. I just love music.
I like both too. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure, thanks.
What a pleasure. Thank you. We're going to have a chat with Deli CONNELL. Hi, Deli.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Deli is one of those people that, like, I've been in this community for 9 years and you always hear about Deli, but I don't think we had many interactions before. And then suddenly when it happened, just like, whoa, why this didn't happen before? So amazing.
But people have said to me, I thought you left town. I haven't seen you around. But
Are you hiding, Deli?
On the down low, you know, sort of under the radar. But no, we were building a house. So we lived at Matarangi for a year, which was fantastic. Shout out to the Matarangi community. It's a beautiful place. And now we're at Wharikaho. So we're sort of not right in the centre of the metropolis of Whiri anymore. So
Metropolis.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this, for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Before we jump into this great chat, I just want to say thank you to Lot of Love Plant-Based Cooking. Our friend Tanya Arnold brought this amazing plant-based lasagna. Check out our Instagram to see that story. Beautiful foods, beautiful Kai. So Tanya runs private classes. So if you want to learn how to cook plant-based foods or gluten-free foods, like, she is the boss. She's amazing. She brought us some treats as well, so soon we're going to bring some treats. Yeah. So make sure to check her out. It will be in our screen. Is lotoflove.co.nz, Papa, is that correct? So have a look, and make sure to follow her and reach out if you're coming to spend some time over Christmas, over the summer break, to learn and enjoy and have some good food. All right, Deli, I was
Leo
stalking you, obviously. That's what I do with the guests.
It's just slightly creepy.
Yes, I pretend that I didn't, but I did. You've done so many cool things, but most of them connected to education. Was it a thing, like, does it run in the family? Was it something that, like, you were inspired by people in your family who were teachers, who were educators? How did that come about?
Absolutely not.
Great.
So
Great.
and it's really funny because both of my wonderful young women, my daughters, say to me, are you sure you're related to the rest of the whānau? Because you're just kind of a bit weird and quirky and out there and doing other stuff that my wonderful siblings aren't doing. So no educators in the family. Completely left field.
Okay. What was the thing in the family? What was mainly the trades, the jobs that were happening?
Well, because I'm really, really old, and the youngest child of older parents, my grandfather was in World War One, Dad was in World War Two, and in that era, mums were homemakers, so mum was this incredible cook and chief sort of disciplinarian and maker of amazing home-cooked goods and bottling and all of that sort of stuff. And Dad, was a fairly hard-working taxi driver, bus driver, mechanic, A-grade mechanic. So there weren't any university degrees or just a fairly humble family, hard-working family. So I think I was definitely the first one that popped off and got a university degree. Yeah.
Would you make sense at the time, like when Dad was at war? Like, would you make sense of what was happening?
I wasn't round then, Leo.
Did you say that he? No, I'm saying, like you said that he went to war.
He went to war.
You were not born yet at the time.
Oh gosh, no.
What about these stories? Like, would you hear some cases and some?
It's interesting because when you're a teenager, you rage against your parents quite often. And I remember him trotting off down to the RSA with his, wasn't telescopic, but it was like a portable pool cue. So he could unscrew it and put it in his little bag, and he would trot off down to the Returned Servicemen's Association to play pool. And I go, oh, you're just going down there to talk about the war and glorify war and rah, rah. I knew it all at 14/15. And then when I was older, I read his diaries, and he was the only Kiwi, or one of two or three Kiwis on a British destroyer, because we didn't actually have a navy at the beginning of the war. And he was, when he came back from the war, he was claustrophobic. And I wondered what that was. Elevators and three-door cars, he just couldn't do them. And he was very into tech and television and sonar in the war. And they would actually batten down the hatches, literally, of the sonar guys who were below the water line. And the ship was compartmentalised so that if they took a torpedo, that section of the ship would fill up with water and those men would be sacrificed. So as I got a little bit older, I read these diaries and had conversations with him and changed my attitude completely, because nobody would have willingly bought into that shit. And nobody would have come home not scarred or damaged in some way. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't it interesting how usually, because New Zealand and a lot of the European countries, they were the ones who, let's say, won the wars. Wars usually don't have winners, in my perspective.
Yeah,
but
true.
like they won
Yeah.
the war. So sometimes it's hard for us to understand the traumas that are carried on from the people in other countries, because sometimes you say, oh, but like that, those conflicts don't even happen anymore in that scale. And you're like, well, but people are still grieving, and like there's a lot of
intergenerational, right? It goes through generations.
and sometimes we don't. It's hard to understand that concept, right? If it's not part of your reality, like if you didn't grow up with that, is it something that you come across when you because you've done some work in some quite like, what's the word, not developed countries, undeveloped countries, like, do you pick up that thing with the vibes of like traumas that run in poor places? Or?
I want to pick up what Anusha said about
Yes,
the
please.
intergenerational trauma, because there was this kind of left field theory around cellular memory, where some practitioners believed that, say you were the daughter of a Holocaust victim or detainee at Auschwitz or somewhere like that, that the cellular memory in your DNA would cause symptoms of PTSD, or anxiety, that you think, where on earth does this anxiety come from? And it was poo-hooed by the medical profession, and now the research is starting to actually follow that train of thought and to say you don't need to have personally lived trauma to have intergenerational, almost like marking or imprint on your DNA. Aside from the stories, aside from that nature, nurture, you've been nurtured with stories, but the nature, your very nature can be affected by the trauma that your ancestors, your whakapapa, your tupuna have actually brought to the table. But the other thing is, you go to somewhere like France, and there are memorials to, say, Kiwi soldiers, and these people are raising a Kiwi flag every morning with the, the trombone, not the trombone, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a trumpet.
Trumpet.
No, they're not out there with their trombone first thing in the morning. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But they're remembering that, and remembering the trauma, and remembering the collective effort to protect their town and their villages, and it's generations later. So we don't really have that scarring. I'm sure for Māori that there is that scarring. There are those tapu sites where even as a child I was told, we don't go into that forest because that's the site of a horrible battle, and it's therefore tapu. But it's not as tangible because those places weren't built out of stone or brick or whatever. A lot of that old history was wooden, or it was scars on the landscape that have since overgrown. So we don't, Anusha and I were talking about whakapapa before we went live on air, and there is that, the Kiwis of all nationalities originally bring so many things, but we don't always have that direct connection unless you are quite a New Zealander, where your immediate whakapapa is very close, but people like me have 7 or 8 nationalities that we whakapapa back to. So, yeah.
How is it for you, Anusha? Because your parents were born in a different country, but you is that correct?
Sort of. So my mum was born in South Africa, Indian, but born in South Africa, and my dad was born here, also Indian. So, but they all originally immigrated from India to different places. So,
do you feel like you feel more connected with their roots as well? Like now that you have this passion, you wanna know people's stories, and you wanna dive deep. Like, do you feel like it's not an obligation, but like, do you think it's an essential part of who we are to go back and understand our background?
To be honest, I've only just started going back because I was born here in New Zealand and I grew up in a westernized culture, even though both of my parents, my mum in particular, very traditional Indian. And so I guess unconsciously, and I just did a race and identity course that a friend of mine does.
Interesting.
Who actually would be really great to come onto the show.
Cool.
She'd love her. Where we talked a lot about our roots and how we belong and things like that. And I realized that for a long time when I was a kid, just to fit in. I was whitewashing myself. You know, I was trying to be as westernized or as Pākehā as I could so that I would fit in at school and so I didn't feel different. And I've carried that for quite a long time. And it's only now that I'm starting to, you know,
and that's a form of trauma as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like denying your true self in order to just almost like to disappear. You don't want to stand out and be that different person. And that's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, you know, there is racism in this country. Definitely. And it wasn't, there was nothing wrong with the schools that I was in or anything. I had lovely friends, great teachers. But there was this feeling that I needed to fit in, I couldn't be myself, so I needed to be like everybody else, you know. And the identity course that I did was really cool. And then not long after that, as part of a work thing, I went to the Women in Colour conference. There was the first Women in Colour conference in Auckland, organised by a group called Authenticity Aotearoa. I'd never thought of myself as a woman of colour before. So, yeah, it was a lot of, I'm delving into it now, I guess. I guess it's never too late.
So what it feels to me is like you are educating yourself in the subject, and that brings some sort of like internal peace. Like you understand yourself better. So like it goes back to education in a way. Like you're learning new things, and then you find new paths. And when I was writing the description of this show, I always try to put a question out there for the audience to make them engage with what we're doing. And then I wrote the question, but then I was like, I think I'm going to ask Deli that question and see what she thinks, because you're so involved with education. And I wrote, do you think that education is the area that all governments should be investing on? Is it the main thing? Because you see, the reason why I put that is because you hear that all the time. Oh, put the money in education. Even when you, like, because a lot of people talk about health. Oh, you got to invest in health. But like an educated people usually look after themselves even better. So it makes more sense to always focus on education. But then sometimes you go to a lot of poor countries that don't have the best education, but there's a sense of community, a sense of getting together and kindness and culture. And then I was like, that's something that I want to hear from an educator. How and someone who is involved in the politics as well. Do you think that's a fair call? Like, is it the thing that we should be investing the most?
I think there's two sides to that, and I think schools are under an enormous amount of pressure. I was a primary school teacher in a previous life, and I think there was a lot more freedom around how we engaged with our students. There was certainly less reporting and politics, so there's an awful lot of paperwork and pressure on teachers to perform. So that's one side of it. So we have to balance whether or not we put something else on to teachers. You know, now we've got mental health and youth suicide. We've got children terrified about climate change. So we've got all of these different kaupapa that we're wanting schools to provide. So I see that schools are doing the best job that they possibly can. Our education system used to be people would come here from other countries to study what we were doing. And at the moment, we're seeing that some of the things that we're doing are not very effective. So we probably need our teachers to take a breath and to be able to inform processes around what they teach and what the curriculum looks like and how they deliver it, so that they take some more ownership. But we also need other organisations to take responsibility, whether it's the district council putting education into schools in some way, and I'm not saying that I'm promising this, politician, around waste and climate change and all of those things. There's no doubt that if we give our children tools and empower them in a lot of different kaupapa, whether or not they're struggling thinking I'm part of the rainbow community, or who am I and I don't understand, or they're a young person of colour who's been born in New Zealand, and people are going, where are you from? Where are you from? And you go, I'm from Manukau.
Yeah.
And they're still going, no, but where are you really from? And that's why I asked you that question earlier, where do you whakapapa to?
Yeah.
Which is a completely different thing. You're as Kiwi as, but where is your whakapapa? What strings, because I'm interested in people's backgrounds, what other cultures do you bring to the table as a Kiwi?
Yeah.
So, long convoluted answer, sorry, Leo.
That's good. It's a long show.
But there's definitely two parts. We can't burden our teachers, although there is a willingness with teachers to address some of the gnarly issues, but they've got to be given space to do that. I've just finished a contract with Hato Hone St John, where I was in schools throughout Coromandel and Hauraki delivering the Whatuia to Waiora program, which is a mental health and wellbeing program for years 7, 8. So for all the old school people out there, that's Form 1 and 2. And that was immensely rewarding. And the teachers were saying, yeah, this is something we really need, but we don't have the time to plan it or the resources. You know, we're just trying to cope with the autistic child over there, the child whose parents are going through a messy divorce. You know, that their mother, father, caregiver, they're feeding kids in some schools at breakfast time and lunchtime. So we need some other organisations to get in there, whatever the topic is, but also allow our rangatahi and our tamariki to bring their ideas from the bottom up. Because we do have an attitude, bringing it back to politics, Leo, we have an attitude that young people are not capable of making good decisions or contributing to high-level discussion. And in all of the contracts that I've had in education, that is absolutely, completely untrue, because some of the young people I have worked with should be running the bloody country. Because they're innovative, they don't see barriers, they don't have cynicism. Because one of the things that happens to us when we get into maybe our 20s and 30s, we become cynical. And we go, oh yeah, they've tried that before and it didn't bloody work. You know, it's that sort of attitude. Whereas a child or a young person would go, wow, why don't we do it this way? You know, I was in Indonesia, in Bali, and visited a high school where, and they've got nothing, you know, really, really poor. And they had built a water filtration system out of waste. So out of plastic bottles and recovered pipes and gravel and a bit of carbon and this, that and the other. And it was good enough to filter the water of a complete household of a family 5 or 6. And no teacher came in and said, sit down, little Johnny, I'm going to show you how to build a filtration system. It was like, you know, okay, off you go, see if you can solve a problem. So we need to be educating problem solvers and giving them the space and the tools to solve problems.
I really liked what you said before about, before we started the show, that sustainability means also like the people, you know.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like how that concept came about? Like from what perspective do you look at that sustainable people?
I think that other cultures have had this nailed thousands of years ago. So you've got Ayurveda in India, where we're looking holistically at health, and we're also looking holistically at what we put in our mouths, but also holistically at the environment. The Japanese do something funky called forest bathing. So, and it doesn't mean that they take off all their gear and sort of skip through a forest, but they're aware that they're surrounded by technology. I've worked with students who got up in the dark, drove to their office building, parked in the underground car park, went into an office that had artificial lighting all day, and reverse on the way home. So they understand that they need to go out into the ngahere, the forest, and actually just do nothing pretty much, but walk through and look at things mindfully, the detail of the leaves versus the sun, the smells in the air, the sounds in the air, and that's essential to their well-being. So, yeah, sustainability in terms of, and I hate that word silo, but it kind of is that we put things into containers and we say, over here we've got, say, the Department of Conservation, And over here we've got Enviro Schools doing education in schools, and over here we've got Whatuia Te Waiora, which is the mental health wellbeing program I was working with. There are possible cross-pollinations across all of those programs in terms of young people's stressed anxiety out into the forest, planting or reforestation, but don't tell them you've got a hectare over here and we want tea tree. Say, look at this environment we've got here. This is your environment. What are you going to do? This happened at Golden Bay High School in Takaka, near Nelson. They actually went in there and they said, the Crown has this block of land. What do you want to do with it? You need to research what plants and trees grow. And, there's a swampy part and there's a dry, sunny part. So too soon we run in there and we say, here's a task for you to do and it's going to make you feel good. But kids can see through that really quickly because there's no ownership. It's like, well, I'm actually just slave labour. You're just sending me out there to go and plant some trees for you. Whereas if you say, this is your block, we've got resources and tools for you. What do you need? Here's some paper and pens and here's some people to talk to and what websites do you think you would search? So that whole mental health and wellbeing thing around being empowered, contributing, forest bathing, all of those factors, nothing is ever just a simple one-step solution. I think we have to look across the spectrum of interactions with each other and our natural environment to have total well-being. So it's respecting Papatua Nuku, but it's also respecting tangata, the people, at the same time. So that's mutual crossover. And of course, Māori have had this nailed for generations as well with their concept of kaitiakitanga, which is, I don't own this piece of land. I'm the caretaker of this land, and it will be my mokopuna who will inherit the land and the actions that I have chosen to take on that.
I would have loved a project like that, if the forest one. It sounds really cool to have ownership of something like that as a young person. Yeah.
Because you'd remember that feeling of going into class and it's like, this is what we're going to do today.
Yeah, it sounds super exciting.
These are the tools you're going to use. And you're like, oh, well, that's exciting because I have no input. There's no creativity. There's no maths. There's no science. There's no nothing. Whereas everything that involves a project, particularly in the outdoors, involves all of those things. Yeah. Weighing and measuring compost materials or ratios of phosphorus for nitrogen or whatever. There is so much learning that can actually happen in a project, but the kids will seek out what they need. So the teacher is a facilitator, the person that's standing there going, I've got a laptop, I've got scissors, I've got glue, I've got spades, what do you need? You tell me what you need and you go and take ownership of this program and be allowed to fail. I think you have to be allowed to fail as well. Yeah.
Does failure exist? Is it a thing, or is it just how you choose to look at it? What's the thing with failure?
I think it's probably not PC to talk about failure, but I actually think it's a really healthy thing. So, crap, that idea didn't quite work. Okay, mate, what was your original plan? Well, it actually went this way. Well, that's cool. What have you learned? So that didn't work. It did actually fail, but you haven't failed. You've got another opportunity to rejig, reboot, and look at this in a different way, or if you're over that, move on to a different project because that's not lighting your fire anymore. Yeah.
Are you good at picking up those things when it's time to let go and do something else?
I think I'm better seeing that in other people than myself.
Observer.
I'm really cool at going, yes, little Leo, that's fantastic. I can see you're getting a little bit frustrated. Tell me about it, mate. Okay. What would really light your fire? Where do you think you want to go next with what we're doing with this mahi? But I'm more likely to get really shitty myself if something's not quite going as it should. Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying before, technology, it's helping us with so many things, like it's easy to give shit to technology, but we also have technology, the amazing things that it does.
Totally.
So if we were to check both sides of the story, and that goes for both of you, what do you think are the great things that we're evolving, that we're doing good with technology, that you see amazing things coming our way, and what are the aspects that we have to be mindful and careful because it can take some nasty turns?
or just some agile manoeuvring. That sounds like a politician, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Anusha,
that
are you
was
going
good.
first?
No, you go first.
She just dropped me right in it. I think technology is a wonderful thing, and we do have to be agile, and that's one of the words that is used in big business currently, as Anusha would probably know as a marketing person. But in the being agile, we need to, I think the biggest risk, there's lots of opportunities, but the number one biggest risk is losing human contact. And I'm very aware of that. It's like even, and no disrespect to one of our local banks, is now only open on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And I'm thinking even everything's, those things are automated. And when I think of elderly people who live alone, for example, or people who are not working, or people who have mental health challenges, they can't afford necessarily to go to a cafe and go and have a coffee and talk to the person behind the counter. I just got a splash.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
From your link.
Thank you.
Was that a message from God? Pouring cold water on what I'm trying to say is what's happening. So I think we have to balance this amazing technology. I mean, you can do surgery remotely. Somebody could be in India, for example, and the surgeon could be in New York, and they can be operating on somebody using that remote technology. So it's stunning, but we have to not lose the humanity. And I think this is also what some of those people like teachers and nurses and doctors are saying. It's not directly related to technology, but it is related to not having the space to be the nurturer, the carer, to have the conversation, to see that person and acknowledge them and say, I understand you're frustrated with your banking, or I understand you're frightened about your operation, or I'm fearful of losing humanity. So that means that some of those community-driven projects become even more important because they're bringing people together to interact and support each other, and the benefits multitude.
Anusha?
Firstly, I didn't know that you could do surgery remotely.
Yes, you can.
That's
crazy. So the robot at the other end, you've got your robot in New York, and the person in India is lying on the table, and you're,
That's crazy. I did not know that. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Did I just make that up?
You had a dream.
I probably did. I'm known for being a bit left field. But
I knew about consultations online. So, but that it wouldn't make sense.
I could have made it up, Anusha. Now somebody in the room needs to Google that now. You've got to search that and find out if remote surgery is actually real.
I wouldn't be surprised though. No, I could. Yeah, it does make sense.
I completely agree about human connection. Yeah. I think it's also about equity, digital equity. There's an organisation there's a few different organisations and small projects and things like that in New Zealand, but I did a little bit of work for Digital Equity Aotearoa, Digital Equity Coalition Aotearoa, DECA.
Nice.
And it's about accessibility and equity and things like only being able to do their banking online. You're shutting out a whole lot of people by not making things accessible, and I think that their kaupapa came about during COVID, when everything was remote, everything went online, and older people with disability, people who don't know how to use technology properly, didn't have access. And so, I love technology, and technology is a huge part of my job, but I'm also very aware of it being equal. And then you think about developing countries like you've been to as well, that don't have as much access, and how do you make it so that everyone has enough opportunity?
Because it's exclusive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you then exclude a section or a sector of your society because they don't have access to the tech.
Yeah.
There's an amazing initiative in not South Auckland. What would you call Mount Roskill? That's sort of westy south, southy west,
central south,
where a group of schools are actually, the families can rent to own a device for their children for $1 a week or something quite negligible. And a lot of people go, $1 a week, what's that? But to some households that is, there is no fat in the budget. So that ability to send their child to school, and in other places I know big business, have actually sponsored, here's 200 devices for your school, because you are excluded if you have only got pen and paper.
Yeah.
There are so many things you can't access. So
What is it? BYOD, right? Bring your own device. Which was like a completely different thing. When I was at school, there was no devices. There was the pen and the paper and taking notes in your book and everything.
You must be really old.
Oh, yeah.
Ancient.
You're younger than me, huh?
I think I'm 33. I forgot.
Oh, look, we're not going into ages. we're not going to play that game, you guys. Oh, stop it.
Can I just bring a comment to the table so we don't lose momentum here? So it's real. The use of robotic surgery increased 8.8% in the first 4 years after hospitals began performing robotic surgery.
So I didn't make it up.
No.
I'm so relieved.
Good.
I just thought I was going a little bit, old lady crazy. So
Now you're good. And we also have a comment from Tanya saying, I think that relates to what we were saying before. I believe that unless we can heal our cellular memories, we can have unexplained physical symptoms. What do you think? Unless it is something very oblivious like a broken limb or virus, etc.?
yeah, if it's something obvious, it's a physical injury. But yeah, it's an interesting space, and I can't talk with authority on that, but it's something somebody needs to Google that as well. But I understand that there are people, card-carrying official medical scientific researchers who are starting to say, oh my God, this is a thing. Whereas 20 years ago, it was like, oh, you've been smoking too much wacky backy and you've come up with another weird theory. But yeah, it is a thing, apparently.
So there's another topic that we often hear nowadays, which is like, how is that, Taylor? Tough times create tough men,
innovation,
and then tough men, and then and tough men create softer times, and then softer times create softer men, and then it keeps going in this loop, and then we end up now in a time that people are saying that now we have soft men out there, and there's this thing of like, you gotta talk about your problems, you gotta trying to find labels for everything that you're feeling, and that is creating a weaker, softer manhood kind of thing. Like, do you think that applies? Is it something that we should be because now what I feel like is that there's more research, there's more understanding of how our emotions play. So it's a good time, it's a good time to understand what you actually have. But then a lot of people will be, this is making us, now we have a label. I can't do this because I have this, or I cannot do that because I have that. So like you use that as an excuse for some people. It's a way to explain that. So I just want to throw that.
I'm going to throw that over to Anusha because she threw me under the bus before. Like, no, you go first.
What's the question?
Well, do you think that applies? Like every time that we start to explain something and people start to hang on like labels or ways to explain their weaknesses, we're actually making people weaker, or not? It's a way to make them better because now you can explain why something is happening to you. Maybe it's because something that happened with their ancestors, and you're suffering that. So instead of saying, you're weak, you should toughen up. No, let's understand why we're living like this, why society is like this, and make this better.
So the thing that comes to mind was what I was saying before about realizing that I'm a woman of color, right? That's a label. That's not a label I've ever associated with myself because I always just saw myself as a New Zealander. But that is a container, and it probably has affected my life quite, in quite a lot of ways, but I haven't realized it because I didn't know the label, and I never saw myself as part of that thing. And so it's been positive for me because it's opened up, maybe that's the reason why blah, blah, and maybe that's the reason why I don't take opportunities or don't do certain things, whatever, like it's subconscious sort of thing. But labels can also be dangerous. I think especially around health or mental health, labels around mental health. So being diagnosed with something, and then then everything that's associated with that becomes you. You start absorbing all of that stigma and everything like that. So it depends on the thing, I think. Yeah.
Do you have a take on that, Deli?
I do, and I think that was really cool. It was really eloquent, and I think it's not an excuse. And it was funny because I was in the car with the lovely Rekha Giri Percival, who you're going to get on air at some point.
Yeah.
And we were talking about people blaming their childhood and this happened to me, therefore my life is ruined or I can't move forward. I think when you identify the blockages or the challenges or the reason maybe I've had anxiety or the reason I've always found it hard to public speak or the reason why could be one of these things that make up the tapestry of me. So, and I really appreciate what you're saying about labels because I think people are a tapestry and your whakapapa is one part of what makes you, but you're also a New Zealand-born Kiwi wahine toa with this amazing skill set and a great partner and this lifestyle and experiences. So that being a woman of colour is just one part. I think when it becomes overwhelming or it is you know, say you've got depression, you become, I am depression. And, you know, depression might be something that is your Achilles heel or it's your challenge, but it's part of the tapestry. You know, I know people who've been madly depressed who are the most wonderful musical performers and they vomit every time before they go on stage and nobody knows that, but it's part of their tapestry and they they understand it and they go, this is part of me and that's my little thing I have to deal with. But I'm also a really good musician and I'm also a loving father, partner, lover, whatever. And this is just part of the whole. And I think with knowledge does come power.
Yeah.
So if you actually look and go, I've always been resentful of because this happened to me, I'm going to work on getting over that resentment, but I'm not going to let it hold me back.
Yeah.
Deli, how long have you been into politics in New Zealand?
I did 3 terms. That was kind of just like he just shifted gear completely. It was like, did you hear my
man?
Took a turn.
I sort of my head was spinning on my shoulders.
I kind of wanna,
the hell?
I want to go back there, but I think I need some more
couldn't
information
find
about
you
it.
couldn't find an artistic or elegant way of going there.
Oh,
so you
no,
just came in with gumboots and went.
I would.
How long have you been a politician?
I want to find a connection there with the way that that when you are a politician, when you put yourself out there and you're dealing with people, there's a special way to do that when you are, because you're representing people. I try to remind my friends, especially in Brazil, because politics becomes like soccer, you know, like you're supporting them, and when they win, like you celebrate. I'm like, you suck, like they work for you, man, like what are you doing, like, you know, like go
keep it humble
and tell them what you want to happen, like don't fight, don't argue. So I ask that because I want to link this to what is the relationship like as an educator for someone who is out there doing the work as an educator, and then you jump into politician, which also works with people, but it's a bit of a different thing, you know, like when you educate, you are there for the person, and when you want someone to vote for you, it's a different relationship there, right? So I just wanted to get your time and your experience into that to kind of make a connection to the teaching and the politics. Wow,
is the camera catching the hand action?
I just explained how my brain works, and it was so messy.
Wow, but yeah, I don't even want to look inside your brain.
I do have a point though.
Yeah, the splashes are getting bigger, right?
So horrible, eh? Can we do the clap again for the leak? For the and I'm just trying to move the tower around so it splashes at different points. Sorry.
Different angles.
Yeah, different angles.
I think I've been very lucky. So in terms of, you know, I met this bearded guy from the Coromandel, ended up living in Whitianga. I've been here 40 years, coming up next year.
Wow.
And there aren't a lot of jobs that have lit my fire or jobs available for people with my skill set. And I don't say that arrogantly. It's just that you have ability or interest in a certain field, and Whitianga isn't a town big enough to have those sort of organisations based here. They tend to be based in large centres. So, you know, I was teacher, primary school teacher, and then I worked for the Coromandel Outdoor Language Centre. So most of my career has actually been working with adults in the education sphere. And I've gone on to have contracts with UNESCO, and more recently, just prior to COVID, I worked at the Eastern Institute of Technology in Napier, and it was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade contract. And I was the only odd person in New Zealand. I think there's lots of odd people in New Zealand, but the only odd person in New Zealand. I think I've found my people. Yeah, I found my tribe. The only odd person in New Zealand who had a background in sustainable development and an ESL, English as a second language qualification. So they went, oh my God, come and work for us for 9 weeks. So we were working with government officials from Southeast Asia. And I think there is a level of diplomacy and understanding. I've been fortunate to work with people of God knows how many nationalities, and you get very close to people when you're in that privileged position of being a mentor and a teacher and a facilitator, and people share stuff with you. And you start to understand that maybe what you see on TV and what is reported through a very Western, US, British, Australian lens, just try watching Al Jazeera for a change and see a different perspective on international news. It's been filtered, and it's kind of been made palatable for our British, Kiwi, English diet for news. So when you start working with people from other nationalities, it builds up your knowledge and understanding, sort of like a bit of a portfolio of diplomacy, for want of a better word. So concurrent to that, I was a community board member for 3 terms, so that's 9 years, and really wanted to step up into the council role because it's a district-wide lens rather than a ward focus. So you're not just looking at Mercury Bay, you're looking at the whole peninsula. Excuse me. And those opportunities there, like if we take climate-savvy actions or we take waste reduction actions, that we have all the wards linked together and working together. So I suppose that coming to that political sphere, I've now given up my education contracts, because even though being a councillor isn't particularly well paid, I think it deserves basically full-time energy into reading and understanding and working really hard. And it's not election year anymore, so that wasn't a campaign statement or a slogan or a T-shirt. But you know what I mean? I think having that breadth of experiences, one of my council colleagues said to me, God, is there anything you haven't done? Because we were talking about theatre, and I've done quite a lot of theatre, and I've even tap danced competitively. And he went, cool. What? I said, well, you don't get to 60, excuse me, and not have done a bit of shit here and there, you know. So, I think that breadth of experience and that getting out of Whitianga, as beautiful as it is, you can get very parochial and very narrow in your focus, and it's so healthy to, you know, go to other places and see what other people are doing and interact with other people. I've been to South Korea representing New Zealand at UNESCO in the education sphere, and talking to other people at a dinner table and what their challenges are. And I think you mentioned undeveloped countries, and it's like, we don't know we're alive here sometimes. And some of the things that we think are problems and issues are just minuscule. So I think I came to it was like a natural progression. It was a love of people, literally, that environmental sustainable development lens, that education lens as well, because and education can sometimes sound like you're schooling people, whereas education using the Māori word kaiako, which is, that we both eat of the knowledge, that word kai referring to food. Kaiako is where actually the student and the teacher, or the line becomes blurred, and we start feeding knowledge and eating of the knowledge of each other. So I think, that's kind of ended up in this spot now. Yeah.
That concept was brought up in Brazil in the 70s by an educator called Paulo Freire, who did, have you heard about him? He did amazing things for Brazil in the education realm, but as it would happen, a lot of people saw that he was actually educating the masses, and you want the mass to be stupid so he can be easy manipulated. So he was actually, I think they got him out of the country for a while, and it was a shame, but that was his thing. That was like, a good teacher comes to the classroom knowing that there are things that those kids know that he doesn't know, and he should be humble to be ready to learn from them first, understand who they are, and then he can pass.
Couldn't agree
Something
more.
that he knows. And then, so what you said about I didn't know that about the kayako word, and that's beautiful. Thanks for, that makes a lot of sense now.
Is he pedagogy of?
Yeah, pedagogy of the oppressed.
How do you say that word?
The
Pedagogy.
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 I never get that right. Of the oppressed.
The book, right?
Yeah. We had to read that at uni.
It's an amazing
as part
book.
of a social change course.
Isn't it funny how you often, like, you know, we might be a weird tribe, but I think we're all reasonably well educated. But there are so many words out there that you've read and you've understood the context, but you've never heard them spoken aloud.
Yeah.
You know, if you get into that academic sort of world, you're sort of like, how the hell do you know? Don't make me do a presentation on that because I don't know how to say it. Yeah.
It's a funny one because English is my second language, obviously.
No, not obviously. Your English rocks.
Oh, thank you very much. But sometimes my friends are surprised how I get words right. And they're like, how do you know that word? And I'm like, I'm literally like kind of making an English version of a Portuguese word because it works. It's a Latin rooted like language as well. So for example, the other day we were saying, the states should be like. And my friends were like, and I'm like, yeah, like. And they were like, what do you mean like? And I was like, LAIC. And they were like, what's that word? And like we went on these arguments, like they thought I was making up a word, but that's the meaning of like it's when there's no religion. So it's a state, but like the way that I was pronouncing it, they didn't know the word. And I'm like, how do you know that word? And I don't know. In Portuguese we say laico. With a no at the end, and I was like, I'm just giving it a go. And like the more I do that, the more I understand how language is
fascinating. Language is insanely fascinating, and it's exactly like when I was teaching for the Coromandel Outdoor Language Centre, and also with the government officials down the line. That gets, particularly your Southeast Asian students, would get so annoyed because the Swissies, Germans, French, Italians would all just pop out a word, and they'd go, why is his vocabulary so good? And they go, he's bloody cheating is what he's doing. He's just thinking of a French word / Italian word, saying it with an English accent and hoping like hell.
Hoping it works.
That it's going to work. Whereas, your poor
Sometimes
Japanese student is sitting there going, I'm such a failure because I don't have this vocabulary. And I go, no. They're cheating. There's very few words in Japanese that are derived from English.
That's
Might be
right.
taberu and terebi, your TV and your table and McDonald's, which is McDonald's. So there's not many.
Do you feel like you became better at reading people because you worked with so many foreigners? Like, is it easier when you go for like body language and just like expressions?
Oh, definitely. I get so frustrated, when they interview someone who's English as a second language on the news or TV, and they've got subtitles underneath, and that person's actually speaking English, and I'm like, how rude, because I'm so good
for everyone, right? If you're gonna do that, put it for everyone.
But I can usually understand them. I'm really good at understanding what people are saying, even with a very limited level of English. And I think, the poor person, he's obviously speaking English, but we're subtitling him because he's got an accent. Yeah.
Hey, can you talk a little bit about the Outdoor Language Centre? The Coromandel
Outdoor Language Centre.
What
It was a great school.
I just want to have a little shout out to Morris Kirby, who's now retired living in Kuatunu, and he was the founder. Him and his partner, Burnett, had been teaching in Japan and came back and decided, wouldn't it be amazing to have foreign students coming to such a blissful place like here to learn English, but they were also, I understand, so that was late 1980s, that school was established. the first in the country to have learning by doing, to have outdoor activities in the afternoon as an option.
Right.
So, you know, I got to take people kayaking up the Pūrangi to the winery, have a little glass of wine, you know, kayak back down the Pūrangi. It's the most amazing thing because, again, you know, as we were talking before we went on air, if you're not sitting staring at somebody, it's much easier to have a conversation when you're adjacent to somebody and you're both doing something. So whether you're canyoning or you're kayaking or whatever, and the onus isn't on how perfect your English is, but you're just having a yarn.
You're communicating. Yeah.
So you're speaking while you're doing it. It's a bit like after the Christchurch earthquakes when I was National Program Manager for the Enviro Schools Foundation, and we did some mahi in Christchurch. We had a conference, but we had to go and do an action, and I ended up in the Littleton Community Garden turning their compost heap. It was like, you know, 10 cubes of compost. I was exhausted, but I had all of these adjacent conversations with people about the trauma of the earthquake. A little girl came over and said, our cat still hasn't come home, and you know, it was heartbreaking, but it's not like looking at me and talking to me. It's we're in the compost heap and we're dirty and sweaty, but we're having an adjacent conversation, which I think is less intimidating. Yeah. No, I've been very lucky with some of the experiences I've had.
And then Kim Laurie carried on?
Yeah, Kim carried on, and Kim and Robin, and it flew along for a number of years. And then, of course, things started to taper off, and sadly it was closed down just before COVID. So had it not closed down, it would have had to close down. I actually was trying to find a way to buy it and keep it going. But had I tried to do that, COVID would have, you know, scuppered the whole plan anyway. So
such an amazing space, eh? A great idea.
Yeah, fantastic school to be. And, you know, we've got friends we hosted as well. So we had foreign students from the time our children were toddlers. So they've been brought up with all different nationalities, guys as well as girls, and I think their ability to relate to other people is greater than people who haven't been brought up in that situation. Just that empathy and that trying to understand. So even, you know, little 5-year-old daughter in the kitchen with a Swiss girl trying to bake or cook or whatever, and the language is happening and the adjacent conversation. I quite like the adjacent conversation. A lot more empathy, I think, a little bit more softness. In
a world that now we have access to everything, so we see all sorts of people, and we can, you know, connect with people much more easily than before. Why do you think there's this big moment of I don't want to put the label of like extreme right wing, but like usually that's what happens in a lot of the countries where there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of, you know, like racism, and like you would think that the more connected we become, those things would happen less. Is it something to do with like, I don't know, I see it as a system that is like on its last breaths of like capitalism being like just trying to keep that thing going, but we know that it's not going to be sustainable, but like that keeps people in fear, you know, like, and then you kind of hate the ones who are coming because you fear that they might take your job. They're going to take our jobs. So I think you're answering your own question. I'm putting my perspective on it. Yeah, but don't you think he's answering his own question? Oh, but like it's a conversation. Just listening to that and going tick. Conversation, tick, yeah? Oh, cool. So you agree? Next. Yeah. Let's just brutally change to a different subject. No, but it's an interesting thing because a good example is, you know, my children have often said to me, Mum, you know, do we have any Māori blood? And I go, no, darling, I don't believe we have. Why not? Oh, well, I'm sorry about that, but unless, you know, there was an uncle or somebody, I did have an adopted uncle who was Māori, but we've used a little bit of te reo in our everyday speech, and both of my daughters understand tikanga very well, and the whole respect system that goes with that. And my youngest went to Christchurch right in the middle of an earthquake. She was right in the middle of that earthquake and survived, thank God for that. And, you know, she would throw the word whānau or kai, you know, not even difficult stuff, just common words that we use. And one of the students said, oh, you're the blackest person I know.
because they were so unfamiliar with anything to ao Māori, the world of Māori. It was completely foreign to them. Like, are you sure you're not Māori? Because here's a Pākehā girl with brown eyes and blonde hair and olivey skin using the odd word in te reo. And I thought that was really, really sad. She was horrified. She came home, she said, I just don't understand that at all. But back to your question, which you answered so eloquently yourself.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
And, I just want this is a public service announcement. My opinions are my own and they do not reflect Thames-Coromandel District Council in any way, shape or form. Okay, so here's my theory about hate. I think you've had a regime for so long and in government or governance there have been a lot of people of a certain colour and socio-economic background. So the very nature of local government, for example, is that the meetings are during the daytime. You need to either be fiscally very flush or comfortable that you or self-employed so that you can take time off to attend meetings. So it excludes a sector of society who have neither the time or the means, because they've got to go and earn a basic living, to be involved in the governance or government. Unless you do become an MP and then you are actually remunerated adequately. So there's that. So the waka has been steered by a certain demographic, financially and racially, even though I don't like using that word, but, Ngāti Pākehā. So when a culture in the country is having a renaissance, for example, that beautiful young woman on TV1 News that does the weather with the moko kauai, and the hatred, the abject hatred. I've had people I know say, I'm not watching that channel anymore. And it's dripping. They're dripping their hate, their sulfuric acid, because this woman, she's actually speaking English. Excuse me, I can't understand the news and the weather anymore. No. Can you not listen? Are you stupid? Can you not listen and hear she's actually speaking in two languages? So when she says tai rāwhiti, she gives you the correct name in English. So instead of, and what I think it is coming from a sense of deficit. Someone's trying to take something from me. So rather than we are adding culture,
Value,
and value, thank you, Anusha. Rather than we are adding value, you are somehow diminishing me and my culture by putting this other layer in. So I see it as it's this richness, whether we're celebrating Diwali or, the Festival of Lights, which is Diwali. What's the other one? There's lots of different, matariki. Some people were absolutely rabid about the fact that we'd introduced another public holiday. Yet they'll happily go and blow up a guy on a bonfire, which is totally irrelevant. It's just absolutely irrelevant. Most people couldn't even tell you the background to Guy Fawkes Night. So that sense of deficit, I don't believe you can change that with people. I think it's a complete attitude that, even any aspect of co-governance sends people through the roof, so they don't see the they see, here's this culture coming in and trying to dominate me. And they're taking away my way of life that I've always had and I've held very dear. So until people can actually see that when you add layers on, it just becomes a much yummier cake. And it's a much, it's a bit like, what is it, a Black Forest gâteau? With the cherries and the chocolate and the cream and the God knows what else. When you put it all together, isn't that much nicer than a vanilla cake? It's like, it's a deficit mentality. You are therefore attacking my way of life by adding this cultural renaissance or including any other culture, for God's sake. Or someone wearing a hijab or having a mosque in my city, you've destroyed me by doing that. No, you've still got 5 churches down the road. There just happens to be a mosque there. And can people not see that richness? These are the same people who will travel overseas and they will go to, let's say, Fiji. We'll have a easy one. And they'll come home and they'll go, I learned a few words in Fijian. And the lovely barman said bulla to me every night when I went to get my Chardonnay. And you're going, but you won't bloody say kia ora or atamarie or morena. You find that offensive. And so now you're in Fiji spending your bucks and you're so proud of yourself because you can say bulla to the nice black guy that's serving you a drink. So, you know, I've called a few people out on this and it hasn't gone very well.
Keep doing it.
Keep doing it. I think we just have to call people out, really.
Sorry.
Because they don't see themselves doing it. Oh, I've got a phrase book in French because I'm doing a little Rhine tour and a little trip through France with, you know, my tour company, and I can order a beer now. When I was teaching at Eastern Institute of Technology, you got a cheaper coffee if you ordered your coffee in Te Reo. So you turn up with your own cup because they don't do paper. They don't do paper cups because that's bullshit for the environment. So you turn up with your cup, and if you can say, you know, mira ka da 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 da, you get your coffee $1 off. Go for it.
I was just going to ask you, just talking about co-governance. Have you come across Mātiki Mai?
No.
It's a paper written by, and I'm not going to remember his name now because it's important. He's just passed away, Moana Jackson.
Oh, yes.
So him and a bunch of other people, and they did consultation all around the country, and it's a proposal for co-governance for Māori and for them to realise, to have mana motahaki, to have self-determination again. Highly recommend a read. It's very, very good. Will it ever happen? I'm not sure, but that just reminded me when you were saying that about, you know,
maybe you could put that link on to that document would be great. People want to follow up on that.
Yeah. Anusha, on what Deli just said, for someone who is so involved with the cause like you are, what do you see, like, which one do you think is the best way to go about that for the people who are aware of the situation? Like, is it the patience or time, you know, like changes things, or it's like be out there, be outspoken, talk to people, like be a bit extreme, try to make some noise or try to educate, be like, what is the best approach? Because some people, they feel threatened by this conversation.
Totally.
That's hard. I mean, that's hard, right? Like, it depends on who you're talking to. I mean, some situations you need to start with that education, that, you know, informing and educating. I think it really depends on who you're talking to, because, and the majority of the work that I do is with people who are like-minded. So we'll have these conversations. We all agree that, you know, co-governance should be a thing and diversity makes us richer and a better country and all that kind of stuff. But when you're trying to convince people they're not even coming to the line, like they're way, you know, they're not even ready to even explore that yet. That's tough. I would sometimes post about it online, I guess, which hasn't always gone down well. You know, the people that I'm friends with on Facebook who, you know, they're connections that I never see. And they'll pop up and say, well, why are you talking about this, that kind of stuff. So I stopped doing that for a while because others just get into arguments and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think about that sometimes as well.
I think you have to, because Mia Len pointed this out to me the other day, and I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this. He said that I need to remember that my understanding of tikanga and even my very limited understanding of te reo is greater than many people. And I never thought of that because I've always thought it's a little bit deficient. But he said, no, actually it's greater than many people, what you've already managed to put into your kete. And some people don't want to feel stupid. You know, like I know people have said, oh, you know, I'd love to say a karakia at a meeting or whatever, but I'd be scared that I'd stuff up the pronunciation. And I said, well, 99.9% of Māori people that I know are just stoked that you had a go. And there might be the odd person. It's the same with any situation. They'd go, oh, my God, you butchered that. You know, that pronunciation was like, oh, my ears were hurting. But there's again that exclusivity, you know, that you're excluded because people are going, oh, ata marie morena. And you're sitting there and you're going, not that you hate the concept, but you feel inadequate or fearful because you don't know what that meant. And I think creating a safe space where someone can say, oh, what did you just say? Or someone delivers a karakia, well, that's great. Can you explain to me what the karakia was about? And that person, Joe Davis, our local Ngāti Hei kaumātua, is just awesome like that. He is bloody amazing. And I saw him at the area school years ago when there was a pōwhiri, and he got the whole crowd together, the manuhiri, the visitors, and he gathered everyone together and he said, right, we're going to go in there and you're going to hear someone sort of lamenting or wailing. That's called karanga. And when we go in, we're going to go to the left and you'll hear these words and this word and that word, and it's actually blah, blah, blah. So those people, instead of being, oh, crikey, I've never been to a pōwhiri in my life, were like, oh, okay, so this is what's going to happen, and I know what my role is here, and when they say these key words, I understand that they're welcoming us and that we are the manuhiri, and that means visitors. Those people stand straighter, and they walk into that pōwhiri, and they're like, oh, I'm part of something. So it's a bit like the device, bring your own device and being excluded because you don't have the tech. In this case, you don't have the knowledge or the reo. Then that can manifest as anger or fear as well, because like, oh shit, I'm really out of my comfort zone.
Yeah. The last contract I did was with Inclusive Aotearoa Collective, and it was...
You're a bit of a legend.
I've done a lot of different stuff, and
what a night!
She's not even as old as me, and she's done a lot of different stuff.
Keeping it cool.
I'm still trying to figure it out. That's the thing, is I'm trying all the different things until I find the thing. But part of they're working towards being a te tiriti aligned organisation. So
nice.
That's what they want to do, and part of that is the tikanga of each staff meeting we had, because we were completely virtual. Everyone was based all over the country. So we'd only ever meet on Zoom, and every meeting we'd take turns doing karakia to open and close. And I remember being quite terrified of that because I'd never actually worked in a te tiriti aligned organisation before. That was different for me. So, the first few times I was, like nervous, and obviously practiced on my own beforehand and everything like that. But and there were full Māori people in the team as well, so I was obviously like not wanting to F it up in front of them. But as time went on, it got easier. None of them were ever mean about mispronunciation or anything. We were very we were inclusive Aotearoa, so we were an inclusive team.
It would have been a bad look.
It was a learning space, and that's actually how I came across Mātiki Mai, because we did like a little staff book club where we read that paper and talked about it together as a team and everything like that. Another completely new thing, didn't even know it existed, so there's something coming on a plate.
There's a plate. It's levitating. It's levitating like a push into the face. Oh my god.
So we got some yummy plant-based, she said gluten-free treats for us from Lot of Love. What an amazing plate. Look at that.
Oh, it's beautiful. It just looks so yum. I think that's one of the advantages of having worked in education and worked for the likes of UNESCO and Enviro Schools, Jane Goodall Foundation, all of those sort of organisations. When I wasn't in the education sphere, I thought everyone started their meeting with a karakia and had a karakia motekai, so you always had addressed the food and gave thanks for that, and you finished your day with a poroporoaki to wrap it up and send everyone safely on their way. So that was just my normal work day, and then I went to organisations and I went, people don't do this. And it wasn't a criticism, it was a genuine sort of, that's not the norm. So education's been in that space since the 1980s, when the government of the day recognised that Māori culture, the wakahuia or the vessel, the precious vessel of the culture is the language, te reo. So it's spoken history, spoken whakapapa. Once the language, in the 80s, there were a few old koro and kuia and the very odd academic quite often, or people who lived in remote areas in Northland and East Cape who were fluent. And the government at the time, and I can't even remember who the Prime Minister was, said if we don't do something to have a renaissance of this language, the culture will die. So that's 40-something years ago. So education's been at the forefront of that, and other organisations have kind of jumped on board. There's some very, very cool, even private businesses that follow that kaupapa. But I think, places like certainly our council didn't do that before this recent change of mayor. So, but that's cool, and that's really cool, and that's part of the journey for our district council as well.
I was going to ask though, because your reo is very good. Did you go do immersion in a marae, or how did you learn?
Oh no, I've been spluttering along for a long, long time. So I was, part of that teacher training in the late 70s, early 80s. As I said, I'm ancient. So I was very lucky to be part of a cohort that had learned how to integrate te reo and te ao Māori into science, mathematics, not just, hey, we're going to have a Māori lesson and sing some waiata, but across the board, and came up against parents and teachers who didn't want that. Again, that deficit mentality. You're ruining my child's education. You should be teaching maths and reading and writing, which we actually were doing as well. And of course, learning a language is like gymnastics for the brain. It increases your intelligence and your overall learning ability. So in actual fact, those kids who were learning te reo or Latin or French or German were actually becoming more tuned to learning and giving their brains very good exercise, same as music, mathematics, languages. So recently this year I picked it up again with the wonderful Whaia Joe Kaho, and have been enjoying, along with Mia Len, been enjoying doing that weekly in a night class, and it's a whole pile of Ngāti Tiriti or Ngāti Pākehā sitting around a table with a very kind, very loving and very inclusive kaiako. Very patient as well. So I feel like I'm going to have to do a bit more of that next year. But also just a plug for Stacey Morrison and his wife, whose name escapes me. Oh no, Stacey's the one, Scotty Morrison. Scotty and Stacey Morrison have got a set of wonderful books that you can buy from Paper Plus. Plug for Paper Plus. Please send some dollars to ALTBAYS Paper Plus, because I just gave you a plug. For people who are a little terrified of that, and there's lots of online resources. There's just, if you just Google, beginner te reo, all sorts of stuff pops up. Hemi Kelly, who did the pages for me, he very, very kindly allowed me to use material from his books, Māori Phrase a Day, and I can't remember what the other one is. And I plugged his books in the magazine every month, but also thought if people just want to play with stuff I can say at the dinner table, stuff when I'm playing at the beach, and just chuck a phrase in somewhere. And if you ever see something, it's a bit like pedagogy. If you see something written and you go, oh my God, you could just plug it into your computer, type it in, pronunciation of, and it will just speak to you. And you can play it again and again and again and practice it. So if your one word is going to be morena, saying good morning to people, and you can see it written down and say, oh, it looks like Morena. How do I say that? Your computer will tell you. And there are apps as well. But Hemi Kelly has a Māori language app, and I can't remember what it's called, but maybe I'll send that to you.
The Māori dictionary does that too, doesn't it?
It's fantastic.
Does it for you phonetically, so you can get your pronunciation. It's like bookmarked on my browser.
And te reo's super easy, because unlike bloody ridiculous English, there's only 5 vowel sounds and they don't change.
Yeah.
They never change.
That's right.
E, or oo. It's like, well, and you get, I remember my English students going, you've got bow and bow and through and though. And they're going, but that's all got OU in it, but it sounds different. I know. I'm sorry. English is a bastard. Really sorry about that. There's no explanation. It's just nutty. It'll be the derivation where that word came from originally, but te reo's just fab. 5 vowel sounds. Where you go?
So there you go. For our
It's a
listeners.
challenge.
Give it
for
a
our
go.
listeners. Give it a go.
Give it a go.
Don't be scared.
No.
Remember, you're not having anything taken away from you. You're having something added. Yeah.
Drop it
T-shirt.
back in. Yes.
T-shirt, yeah.
What a pleasure. What a cool show. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed
for
that so
doing this.
much.
Yes, we'll bring you back then.
I feel like we just
We just craved this stuff. I know, right?
You've done
There's
so
some
much cool
deep
stuff.
stuff that we
Yeah.
need to get
Yeah.
into, Anusha. Yeah.
We'll make it happen. I think, and that's one of the things that we envision. That's one of the things that we want to do with this platform. Like, we love putting people together, and we know that a lot of things can come out of these great collaborations and chats. So I'm stoked to accept it to come. Like, I learned so much in this hour and a half.
Oh,
and
stop it.
Thank you so much
Oh, my
for doing this.
pleasure.
Yeah, so eloquent, like, so speak so beautifully and clearly. So thank you so much.
Oh, I told you I've got a face for radio. I think I've got a voice. I've got a voice for radio. But hey,
And
yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Man,
Hey, first
couldn't-
co-host, eh?
Oh, so good. Couldn't be more grateful as well. Anusha's such a big support of Coromandel, the magazine that it started as a beautiful project with Seagull, and it carried on and it changed. And now, we're doing something new, but we feel like all the blessings came from what you started and from the beautiful people who carried on from there. So Anusha's been such an essential part of what's happening now. So I'm very grateful that we can put everyone here
You're
together.
kind of taking it to teenagerhood, like I gave birth to it. Caitlin sort of raised the toddler. Lana had the school-age child, and now
We
you
got
guys
the rowdy teenager.
You've got
I've
the
got the
preteen, I
teenager.
feel. You've got the
Okay.
preteen and all the challenges that go with that.
I hope
You're the
that-
father, though, right?
We'll see.
You and
I hope he's paying
Yeah.
maintenance.
Great. Me too. Thanks, Taylor. Thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure.
What a cool show.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much. It was nice to finally meet you in person.
Yeah,
actually.
me too. Meeting
Heard a
you,
lot
it's like,
about
who is
you.
this woman? Who is
Yeah.
this wonderful woman? Yeah.
There we go. We're gonna have a few more words here. We're gonna share some more knowledge, and we're gonna have some desserts now. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks for you watching at home. We're live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Friday, I have the pleasure to talk to my friend Pete, the Flying Kiwi. He does amazing aerials. Images from all over New Zealand, but he's a local, so it's gonna be pretty cool. I'll see you on Friday at 7. Ka kite.
Kakite.
Kaki day.
Peace. ALTBAYS.
ALTBAYS.